Uber driver kicks out Jeff Bezos. But when he realized who he was, his care was over. The Seattle rain drummed against Mike Thompson's worn-out Toyota Camry. The digital clock on his dashboard read 11:47 p.m., and his bones ached from sitting in the driver's seat for what felt like an eternity. 13 hours into his shift, and the city's neon lights were starting to blur together. "Daddy, when are you coming home?" Sarah's weak voice echoed in his mind from their FaceTime call earlier that day. Her small face, pale against the stark white hospital pillows, haunted his every waking moment. "Soon, princess. Just a few more rides, okay? Daddy's working hard to make you better." His phone buzzed, interrupting the memory. Another notification from the hospital's billing department. Mike's stomach churned as he swiped it away. 147,382.91. The numbers seemed to mock him every time he looked at them. "Focus, Mike. Focus," he muttered to himself, adjusting his rear-view mirror. His tired eyes stared back at him, bloodshot, with dark circles that seemed to deepen every day. At 42, he looked closer to 50. His phone pinged with a new ride request. Medina, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Seattle. The surge pricing was in effect, and the fare estimate made his eyes widen. "Thank you, Lord," he whispered, accepting the ride immediately. The navigation system came to life, directing him toward the pickup location. As he drove, his mind wandered to the events that had led him here. 2 years ago, he'd been a successful construction site manager. Good salary, health insurance, respect. Then came COVID, layoffs, and Sarah's diagnosis, all within 6 brutal months. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. The word still made his chest tighten. His phone rang, startling him. It was Jenny, his ex-wife. "Hey," he answered, putting her on speaker. "Mike, Sarah's asking for you again. The nurses say she's been restless." He gripped the steering wheel tighter. "I just talked to her a few hours ago. Is everything okay?" "Yes, but she misses you. We both know these night shifts aren't good for you. My offer still stands. My parents can help with the bills." Mike's jaw clenched. "Jenny, we've been over this. I'm not taking your parents' retirement money. I'm her father. I'll handle it." "By driving yourself into the ground? Mike, you're working 18-hour days sometimes. When was the last time you slept properly?" A group of drunk college students stumbled across the crosswalk, and Mike waited patiently, watching them laugh and support each other. Young, carefree, healthy, everything Sarah should be. "I got a good fare coming up," he said, changing the subject. "Should help with this month's treatment costs. Give Sarah a kiss for me, okay?" Jenny sighed. "Just take care of yourself. Sarah needs her dad healthy too." After hanging up, Mike turned onto a quiet, tree-lined street. The houses here weren't just homes. They were monuments to wealth. Modern architecture, massive windows, perfectly manicured lawns. Each property probably cost more than he'd earn in 10 lifetimes. His navigation system chirped, arriving at destination. The house before him was impressive even by Medina standards. Glass and steel stretched toward the sky, with warm lights glowing from within. A testament to success, power, and everything Mike had once dreamed of providing for his family. Rider name: Jeff, his app displayed. No profile picture, just the default silhouette. 489 rider rating. Mike sent the standard "I've arrived" notification and waited. The fare timer started counting down. 5 minutes until he could cancel and collect the cancellation fee. Part of him hoped the rider wouldn't show. He was exhausted, and the cancellation fee would still be decent given the neighborhood. His phone buzzed with a text from the rider. "Coming out. In a call. Important." "Great," Mike muttered. In his experience, passengers on important calls usually meant entitled behavior and low ratings. But the potential fare made it worth the risk. Sarah's face flashed in his mind again, her brave smile as the nurses hooked up another round of chemotherapy. Movement caught his eye. A tall figure emerged from the house, one hand holding a phone to his ear, the other gesturing animatedly. Even from a distance, Mike could tell the man's sweater cost more than his monthly car payment. The back door opened, bringing in a rush of cold air and the sound of an agitated voice. "No, listen to me carefully," the passenger was saying, sliding into the back seat without acknowledging Mike. "I don't care what the board thinks. This is a trillion-dollar opportunity. Yes, trillion with a T." Mike waited patiently, glancing in his rearview mirror. The man continued his conversation, completely absorbed. "Excuse me, sir," Mike said politely after a moment. "Could you please confirm your name for the ride?" The passenger covered his phone briefly. "Jeff, downtown Seattle, Sphere Building. Now drive, please. This is urgent." He immediately returned to his call. "No, not you." "Driver, as I was saying." Mike felt a familiar tension headache building. "Sir, I'm sorry, but I need you to properly confirm the ride details before we start. It's company policy." The man in the back seat let out an exasperated sigh. "Listen, I'm dealing with something extremely important here. Just start driving. I'll make it worth your while." The dismissive tone, the assumption that money could bypass basic respect, it hit a nerve. Mike thought of all the doctors and administrators who treated him the same way when he'd struggled to make payments for Sarah's treatment. "Sir," Mike said, his voice firmer now, "I understand you're busy, but I need verbal confirmation of your identity and destination. It's for everyone's safety." The passenger pulled the phone away from his ear again, this time with visible irritation. "Do you have any idea who I am? The time you're wasting right now costs more than you make in a year." Mike's exhaustion, worry, and frustration of the past 2 years crystallized into a moment of clarity. He'd spent months swallowing his pride, accepting condescension, playing by everyone else's rules. But not tonight. "Actually, sir, I don't know who you are, because you haven't properly identified yourself," Mike replied, his voice steady but charged with emotion. "And frankly, I don't care. The rules apply to everyone in my car." The passenger's face darkened. "I'm Jeff Bezos, and I'm trying to close a deal that affects thousands of jobs. Now, are you going to drive, or do I need to make a call to Uber Corporate?" The name registered in Mike's mind, but something had snapped. The dam holding back 2 years of helplessness and frustration burst. "Mr. Bezos or not, you need to exit my vehicle," Mike said, his hand already moving to cancel the ride. "I won't start driving without proper verification and basic courtesy." "Excuse me?" Bezos's voice carried the shock of someone unused to being refused anything. "You heard me. Please get out of my car, now." Mike's heart was pounding, but his voice didn't waver. For a moment, neither man moved. The rain continued its steady rhythm on the roof, punctuated by the distant rumble of thunder. "You're making a serious mistake," Bezos said, his voice cold. "Do you understand what I could do to your career with a single phone call?" Mike thought of Sarah, of the hospital bills, of everything he stood to lose. But in that moment, something else mattered more, showing his daughter that standing up for yourself was worth any price. "My career?" Mike let out a bitter laugh. "Sir, my career ended when my daughter got sick and I couldn't afford to save her and keep my pride at the same time. But I still have my dignity. Please exit the vehicle." Bezos stared at him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without another word, he opened the door and stepped out into the rain. As the door slammed shut, Mike caught a clear view of the man's face under the streetlight. The reality of what he'd just done hit him like a physical blow. He'd kicked out not just any wealthy passenger, but Jeff Bezos, one of the most powerful men in the world. His hands began to shake on the steering wheel. The enormity of his action crashed over him in waves. His phone would probably be buzzing with Uber notifications soon. His account would be suspended, maybe permanently deleted. His only reliable source of income to pay for Sarah's treatment gone in a moment of defiance. Mike put the car in drive, his mind racing. He had to get home, had to think, had to figure out how to fix this. But as he pulled away from the curb, leaving the billionaire standing in the rain, a strange mix of terror and satisfaction churned in his gut. His daughter's voice echoed in his mind again, from a conversation they'd had during one of her better days. "Daddy, are you a superhero?" "Because you always tell me to be brave, and that's what superheroes do." "No, princess, he'd told her then. "I'm just trying my best." Now, as the grand houses of Medina disappeared in his rearview mirror, Mike wondered if he'd just been brave or incredibly stupid. Either way, he knew his life was about to change dramatically. The only question was, how much would his moment of dignity cost him? Mike pulled into a nearby gas station, his hands still trembling. He needed a minute to process what had just happened. The fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow over his face as he parked near the convenience store. "God, what have I done?" he whispered, resting his forehead against the steering wheel. His phone buzzed, another ride request. He couldn't bring himself to look at it. Instead, he pulled up Sarah's picture on his phone, her 8th birthday, just 2 months before the diagnosis. She was beaming at the camera, chocolate cake smeared across her cheeks, eyes sparkling with joy. That sparkle had dimmed lately, buried under the weight of endless treatments and hospital stays. His phone rang. Jenny again. "Hey," he answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "Mike, Sarah's asking if you can come read her a story tomorrow morning before her treatment." He closed his eyes, fighting back tears. Yeah, I'll be there. Jenny, I think I just did something really stupid." "What happened? Are you okay?" Mike let out a shaky laugh. "I just kicked Jeff Bezos out of my car." The line went silent for a moment. "You? What?" "Jeff Bezos, Amazon, world's richest man. He got in my car, acted like a complete jerk, wouldn't follow basic protocol, so I kicked him out." "Mike," Jenny's voice was barely a whisper, "please tell me you're joking." "I wish I was. He threatened my career, and I still told him to get out. I couldn't take another rich person treating me like I was nothing." He heard Jenny sit down heavily. "The medical bills. Mike, we needed that Uber income." "Don't you think I know that?" His voice cracked. "I know I just ruined everything, but you should have heard him, Jenny, the way he talked to me. Like I was less than human. Like Sarah's life depending on this job meant nothing." A notification popped up on his phone. "Your account has been temporarily suspended pending review. Please contact Uber support immediately." That fast. Of course. "They've already suspended my account," he told Jenny, his voice hollow. Maybe we should call the media," Jenny suggested, "if people knew how he treated you." "No," Mike said firmly. "I won't use Sarah's situation for publicity. I'll figure something out." A knock on his window made him jump. A young woman was standing there, holding her phone up to the glass. Mike rolled down his window. "Are you the Uber driver who just kicked out Jeff Bezos?" she asked excitedly. "It's all over Twitter already. Someone from his security team posted about it." Mike's stomach dropped. "What?" "Look." She turned her phone toward him. There it was, a tweet from an account claiming to be Bezos' security detail. Tonight showed why protocol matters. "Even Jeff Bezos needs to follow safety rules. Respect to the @Uber driver who stood his ground." The tweet already had thousands of retweets and likes. "Jenny, I've got to go," Mike said quickly. "I'll call you back." More cars were pulling into the gas station now. Mike could see people holding up phones, trying to get pictures of him and his car. His phone was exploding with notifications. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Apparently, someone had gotten his name from the Uber app screenshot. Another notification popped up. "Your account has been reactivated. Please check your email for important information." Mike's hands were shaking as he opened the email. "Dear Michael Thompson, we have reviewed the incident from this evening. While we understand the challenging nature of the situation, we appreciate your commitment to safety protocols. Your account has been reactivated with no penalties. Additionally, a representative from Blue Origin would like to speak with you at your earliest convenience. Please call." Mike leaned back in his seat, overwhelmed. His phone buzzed again, this time with a text from an unknown number. "Mr. Thompson, this is Jeff Bezos' personal assistant. Mr. Bezos would like to meet with you tomorrow morning to discuss tonight's incident. He was impressed by your integrity. Please let us know when you're available." The gas station was getting crowded now. Mike could see news vans pulling in. His phone rang again. Jenny. Mike, turn on any news channel. You're trending nationwide. They're calling you the driver with dignity. He started his car, desperate to escape the growing crowd. As he pulled out of the gas station, his phone kept buzzing with notifications, calls, and messages. But all he could think about was Sarah, and how maybe, just maybe, this nightmare evening might turn into something unexpected, something that could help save his daughter. The rain had stopped, and for the first time in months, Mike felt a glimmer of hope. He pointed his car toward home, wondering what tomorrow would bring. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing. He'd shown his daughter that standing up for your principles was worth any risk. His phone buzzed one more time, a text from the hospital. Mr. Thompson, there's been an anonymous donation covering all of Sarah's outstanding medical bills. The donor requested anonymity but left a message. Integrity matters. Mike pulled over, his vision blurring with tears. Maybe sometimes, just sometimes, doing the right thing did pay off. Mike barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Bezos' face in his rearview mirror, heard the slam of the car door, felt the weight of that moment when everything changed. His phone had been buzzing non-stop until he finally turned it off around 3 a.m. At 6:45 a.m., he walked into Seattle Children's Hospital, clutching a worn copy of The Little Prince, Sarah's favorite book. The morning shift nurses were huddled around their station, whispering and pointing as he passed. "That's him," he heard one say, "the Uber driver from the news. Did you see how much the medical bills were that got paid off?" Mike kept walking, his face burning. Outside Sarah's room, he ran into Dr. Martinez, her oncologist. "Mr. Thompson." The doctor's usual professional demeanor cracked into a wide smile. "I heard what happened last night. Quite an eventful evening, wasn't it?" Mike rubbed his neck awkwardly. "Doc, about those bills." Dr. Martinez held up a hand. "All taken care of, every penny. And," she lowered her voice, "we've received additional funding for Sarah's entire treatment plan going forward, including the experimental therapy we discussed last month." Mike's knees went weak. The experimental therapy, their last hope when conventional treatments had started failing, had been way out of reach at $500,000. "How? Who?" "Anonymous donor, doctor," Martinez said with a knowing smile. "But they left specific instructions to provide Sarah with the best care possible, no expense spared. Mr. Thompson, your daughter has a real fighting chance now." Before Mike could respond, a small voice called from inside the room. "Daddy, is that you?" Mike wiped his eyes quickly and stepped into the room. Sarah was sitting up in bed, her tablet propped on her lap. Her face lit up when she saw him, though the dark circles under her eyes spoke of another rough night. "Princess, ready for your story?" "Daddy, you're famous." Sarah held up her tablet, showing a news article with Mike's picture. "You stood up to a bad man." Mike sat on the edge of her bed, gently taking the tablet. "He wasn't a bad man, sweetheart, just someone who needed a reminder about treating others with respect. Like you always tell me, be brave and be kind." Exactly like that. Mike opened The Little Prince, but Sarah wasn't done. "The nurses said all my medicine is paid for now. Was it the man from your car?" Mike hesitated. "Someone very generous helped us, yes, but you know what's most important?" "What?" "That you focus on getting stronger. Speaking of which," he pulled out his phone and showed her the email from Dr. Martinez about the experimental therapy. Sarah's eyes widened. "The special medicine? The one that could make me all better?" "We're going to try it, Princess. Dr. Martinez says we can start next week." Sarah threw her thin arms around his neck, and Mike held her carefully, mindful of the IV lines. A knock at the door interrupted their moment. Jenny stood there, looking exhausted but excited. "Mike, there are reporters in the lobby. A lot of them. And," she glanced at Sarah, then back at Mike meaningfully, "someone else wants to talk to you." Mike kissed Sarah's forehead. "I'll be right back, Princess. Let's start the story when I return, okay? In the hallway, Jenny grabbed his arm. Jeff Bezos is downstairs, with his entire team. He wants to meet with you privately. Mike's stomach churned. Now? He's been waiting for an hour. His assistant called me when they couldn't reach you. Jenny squeezed his arm. Mike, this could be huge for us, for Sarah. The bills are already paid, Mike said. The experimental treatment too. What more could we need? Jenny gave him a look he knew well, the one that said he wasn't seeing the bigger picture. This isn't just about money anymore. This story is everywhere. You're trending on every social media platform. People are calling you a symbol of standing up to corporate power. Bezos probably wants to get ahead of it. Mike ran his hands through his hair. I didn't ask for any of this. I just wanted to be treated with basic respect. And that's exactly why people are connecting with your story. Jenny's voice softened. Go talk to him. Sarah's stable. I'll stay with her. Mike nodded slowly. Where are they? Hospital conference room, second floor. His security team cleared it. The elevator ride felt like descending into another world. When the doors opened on the second floor, two men in dark suits were waiting. Mr. Thompson? One step forward. I'm David Chen, head of Mr. Bezos' personal security. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Please follow me. They led him down a quiet hallway to a large conference room. Through the glass walls, Mike could see Jeff Bezos sitting at the table, along with several other people in expensive suits. David opened the door. Mr. Thompson is here, sir. Bezos stood immediately, and Mike was struck by how different he looked in the morning light, more human somehow, less intimidating than the angry figure from last night. Mr. Thompson, Bezos extended his hand. Thank you for meeting with me. I believe we got off on the wrong foot last night. Mike shook his hand, noting the firm grip. Mr. Bezos, I appreciate the help with my daughter's medical bills. Bezos waved off the thanks. Please, sit. We have a lot to discuss. The others in the room introduced themselves. Bezos's PR team, legal counsel, and personal assistants. Mike felt overwhelmed by their titles and designer suits. First, Bezos began. I want to apologize for my behavior last night. You were absolutely right to insist on proper protocols. My position doesn't excuse poor manners. Mike shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I appreciate that, sir. Now, Bezos continued, I understand you've been struggling with your daughter's medical bills. Sarah, isn't it, 8 years old? Mike nodded, surprised he knew the details. We did some background research, one of the PR people explained. Your story, it's compelling. A hard-working father doing everything possible to save his daughter. Standing up to one of the world's richest men on principle, not knowing it could cost you everything. About that, Mike interrupted. I want to be clear. I'm not interested in using this situation for publicity or profit. My daughter's health isn't a media circus. Bezos leaned forward, a glimmer of respect in his eyes. That's exactly why we're here, Mr. Thompson. Your integrity last night, and now it's rare. Which is why I have a proposition for you. One of the lawyers slid a folder across the table. Mike opened it cautiously. We'd like to offer you a position, Bezos explained, head of our new driver safety and dignity initiative at Amazon Transportation. Full benefits, including comprehensive medical coverage for your family. 7-figure salary. Mike stared at the numbers on the page. They blurred before his eyes. Why? Because you showed me something I needed to see. Bezos replied. Our success, my success, sometimes makes us forget the human element. Your stand last night, it's exactly the kind of principle we need more of in corporate America. Mike closed the folder slowly. And if I say no? The PR team shifted uncomfortably, but Bezos smiled. Then Sarah's medical care remains fully covered, no strings attached, and you go back to your life, though I doubt that's possible now. You've become a symbol, Mr. Thompson. People are inspired by your story. As if on cue, Mike's phone buzzed. Jenny had sent a link to a new hashtag trending on Twitter, BeMike, with stories of people standing up to unfair treatment at work. I never wanted to be a symbol, Mike said quietly. I just wanted to help my daughter. Sometimes the most powerful symbols are created by people who never intended to be one, Bezos responded. So, what do you say? Mike thought about Sarah upstairs, waiting for her story, about Jenny's struggles since the divorce, about all the other parents he'd met in the cancer ward, drowning in medical debt while trying to save their children. The initiative, he said slowly, would it help other families too? Bezos nodded. That's the idea. We want to create a fund for medical emergencies, better working conditions, real support for gig economy workers, with you as the face of it. I'll do it, Mike said finally, but I have conditions. The lawyers reached for their notepads, but Mike held up his hand. Not legal ones, moral ones. This can't be just for show. If I'm going to be part of this, it has to make real change. Help real people. Bezos stood and extended his hand again. Mr. Thompson, that's exactly why we want you. Welcome to Amazon. As Mike shook his hand, his phone buzzed again. A text from Jenny. Sarah's asking for her story. I need to get back to my daughter, Mike said, standing. She's waiting for her morning story. Bezos smiled. Of course, the paperwork can wait. Family comes first. That's something I was reminded of last night. As Mike walked back to the elevator, David Chen followed him. Mr. Thompson, he called, for what it's worth, you did the right thing last night. Not many people would have had that courage. Mike pressed the elevator button. It wasn't courage, it was just being a father. The doors opened, and Mike stepped in, leaving behind the corporate suits and life-changing offers. Upstairs, Sarah was waiting for her story, and right now, that was all that mattered. As he walked back into her room, Sarah looked up from her tablet. Daddy, look what's trending. She held up the screen, showing the #BeMike hashtag, now with over 1 million posts. Mike sat down and opened The Little Prince. How about we focus on a different story right now, princess? Sarah snuggled against him as he began to read. Once when I was 6 years old, I saw a magnificent picture in a book. Outside the room, life at the hospital continued as normal. But for Mike Thompson, everything had changed. Not because he'd stood up to one of the world's most powerful men, but because in doing so, he'd found a way to help not just his daughter, but countless others. Jenny watched from the doorway as Mike read to Sarah, a small smile on her face. Her phone buzzed with another news alert about the story, but she ignored it. The real story wasn't in the headlines or trending hashtag. It was right here, in a father reading to his daughter, in the simple dignity of standing up for what's right, in the unexpected ways life could change in a single night. Later that afternoon, Mike sat in the hospital cafeteria, picking at a cold sandwich while scrolling through his phone. The media frenzy had only intensified. Mind if I join you? Mike looked up to see Jack, one of the regular nurses from Sarah's floor. The young nurse was clutching his lunch tray, looking somewhat nervous. Please, Mike gestured to the empty chair. Man, you're like a celebrity around here now, Jack said, sitting down. Every patient is talking about you. You know what little Tommy in 403 said? He called you the people's hero. Mike groaned. Not you too. I'm just a dad trying to do right by his kid. That's exactly why people are connecting with this story. Jack leaned forward. Do you know how many parents I see here every day, crushed by medical bills, having to choose between treatment and rent? You stood up to the system. Mike's phone buzzed again. Another interview request, this time from CNN. I didn't stand up to the system, Mike sighed. I just kicked a rude passenger out of my car. I didn't even know it was him at first. But that's what makes it perfect, Jack exclaimed. You treated him like any other person. Do you know how rare that is? Before Mike could respond, his phone rang. Jenny's name flashed on the screen. Hey, he answered. Mike, turn on the TV, right now, any news channel. The cafeteria had a small TV mounted in the corner. Mike looked up just as Jack grabbed the remote and turned up the volume. Jeff Bezos was holding a press conference outside Amazon headquarters. Which is why I'm announcing today the creation of the Dignity Initiative, Bezos was saying. A $5 billion commitment to support working families facing medical crises. And I'm honored to announce that Michael Thompson, whose integrity and courage inspired this initiative, has agreed to lead it. Mike's sandwich fell from his hand. "5 billion?" Jack whispered. "Holy." Last night, Bezos continued, "Mr. Thompson reminded me of something crucial, that true leadership means treating every person with respect and dignity, regardless of their position or circumstances." His story, his daughter's fight against cancer, and his unwavering principles have inspired us to do better. The cafeteria had gone completely silent. Every eye was on the TV. The Dignity Initiative will provide emergency medical funding, support for gig economy workers, and resources for families facing health crises, because no parent should have to choose between working with dignity and saving their child. Mike's phone was exploding with notifications, text messages, emails, social media alerts, all flooding in at once. "Dad?" He turned to see Sarah in her wheelchair, Jenny behind her. "We wanted to watch it with you," Jenny explained, wheeling Sarah to the table. "Daddy, are you going to help other kids like me?" Sarah asked, her eyes bright with excitement. Mike looked at his daughter, then at the TV where Bezos was still speaking, then at his buzzing phone. 24 hours ago, he'd been an exhausted Uber driver, drowning in medical debt. Now, "Yeah, Princess," he said softly. "I think I am." "Mr. Thompson?" A hospital administrator approached their table, looking slightly flustered. "There are several news crews outside requesting interviews, and Bezos' office is on line 1 at the nurse's station. They need to discuss your schedule for tomorrow's official announcement." Mike looked at his family, then at Jack, who was grinning broadly. "Tell them I'll call back in an hour," Mike said firmly. "Right now, I'm having lunch with my daughter." The administrator nodded and hurried away. "You know," Jenny said, watching Mike share his French fries with Sarah, "when I said you should find a better job, this wasn't exactly what I had in mind." Mike laughed, a real, genuine laugh for the first time in months. "Life's funny that way, isn't it?" "Daddy," Sarah tugged at his sleeve, "can we still have our story time when you're a big, important boss?" Mike pulled her into a gentle hug. "Princess, I could be running Amazon itself, and I'd still never miss story time." As the cafeteria buzzed with excitement around them, Mike held his daughter close, thinking about all the other families he might be able to help now. One moment of standing up for his dignity had somehow turned into an opportunity to help countless others maintain theirs. His phone buzzed again, another message from Bezos' team about tomorrow's press conference. But that could wait. Right now, he was exactly where he needed to be. The Amazon headquarters lobby buzzed with anticipation. 1 week after the viral incident, Mike stood before a wall of mirrors in a private bathroom, adjusting a tie that cost more than his old weekly Uber earnings. The designer suit felt foreign on his body, a costume for a role he still wasn't sure he could play. 15 minutes, Mr. Thompson," called David Chen, who had somehow transitioned from Bezos' security detail to being Mike's personal assistant. Just give me a minute," Mike called back, his hands shaking as he tried to fix his tie for the 10th time. The bathroom door opened, and Jenny slipped in, already dressed for the press conference in a simple but elegant blue dress. "Here, let me," she said, moving to fix his tie. "Sarah's settled in the front row with your mom. She's so excited to see her daddy on stage." Mike caught Jenny's hands, stopping her. "What am I doing here, Jenny? I'm not qualified for this. I'm just a guy who got angry in his car." Jenny looked him in the eyes. "No, you're a father who stood up for what's right, and now you have a chance to help thousands of other parents do the same." "But." "No buts," Jenny cut him off. "You know how many messages I've gotten from other parents at the hospital? They're all saying the same thing. Finally, someone understands. Someone's fighting for us." A knock at the door interrupted them. 10 minutes, Mr. Thompson." "Look at me," Jenny said firmly. "Remember what you told Sarah when she was scared about her first day of school?" Mike smiled slightly. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared." "Exactly. Now get out there and be brave." The hallway outside was a flurry of activity. PR teams, security personnel, and executives rushed back and forth, all part of what the media was calling the Dignity Initiative launch. As Mike approached the conference room, he could hear the buzz of hundreds of voices through the doors. Reporters, cameras, corporate executives, all waiting to hear from the Uber driver who stood up to Jeff Bezos. Mr. Thompson. A young woman from the PR team rushed up, tablet in hand. Quick review of the schedule. Mr. Bezos will introduce you. You'll give your prepared statement, then. Actually, Mike interrupted, I think I'll speak from the heart instead. The PR team looked horrified. But sir, the approved messaging is lovely, Mike said firmly, but not what needs to be said. Before anyone could protest further, the doors opened. Jeff Bezos himself stepped out, looking relaxed in a perfectly tailored suit. Ready, Mike? He asked, extending his hand. Mike took a deep breath. Ready as I'll ever be. Just remember, Bezos said quietly, you're here because of who you are, not who we want you to be. Speak your truth. They walked onto the stage together, cameras flashing like lightning. Mike spotted Sarah in the front row, sitting between his mother and Jenny, wearing her favorite Wonder Woman t-shirt over her hospital gown. The doctors had given special permission for her to attend. Bezos approached the podium first. Good morning. A week ago, a remarkable incident taught me a valuable lesson about dignity, respect, and the true meaning of leadership. As Bezos spoke, Mike's mind drifted to that rainy night in his Uber. How tired he'd been, how hopeless everything had seemed, how one moment of standing firm had changed everything. And now, I'm honored to introduce the new executive director of the Dignity Initiative, Mr. Michael Thompson. The applause thundered through the room. Mike walked to the podium, his prepared speech burning a hole in his pocket. But when he looked out at the crowd, he saw past the reporters and executives to the faces that really mattered. The hospital workers who'd smuggled him coffee during long nights. The other parents from the cancer ward. The Uber drivers he'd shared parking lots with during break times. He pulled out his speech, looked at it for a moment, then set it aside. A week ago, he began, his voice shaking slightly, I was an Uber driver working 18-hour days to pay for my daughter's cancer treatment. I was tired, frustrated, and feeling like the whole system was stacked against families like mine. The room fell silent. That night, when a passenger got into my car and dismissed basic safety protocols because he thought his time was more valuable than mine, something broke inside me. Not just anger, but a realization that dignity isn't something that should be for sale. Mike looked at Sarah, who gave him a thumbs up. I didn't know it was Jeff Bezos in my car. Honestly, it wouldn't have mattered if it was the president himself. What mattered was standing up for the simple idea that every person deserves respect, regardless of their position or bank account. He gripped the podium tighter. The Dignity Initiative isn't just about money, though the $5 billion commitment will help countless families like mine. It's about changing how we see each other. It's about remembering that behind every delivery driver, every rideshare worker, every person struggling to pay medical bills, there's a human being. A story, a family. Tears were flowing freely in the audience now. Even some of the reporters were wiping their eyes. To every parent out there choosing between bills and groceries, to every worker swallowing their pride just to keep their job, to every person who's ever felt powerless against a system that seems too big to fight, this is for you, because dignity isn't a luxury, it's a right. Sarah was beaming at him from the front row, her thin face glowing with pride. And to my daughter Sarah. Mike's voice cracked slightly. Who taught me that being brave isn't about winning fights, but about standing up for what's right? You're my hero, princess. Everything I do for you. The applause was deafening. Bezos stepped forward to shake his hand, genuine respect in his eyes, but Mike was already moving toward the front row, where Sarah was reaching for him with both arms. He lifted her carefully, mindful of her IV lines, and held her close as cameras flashed around them. Did I do okay? He whispered in her ear. You were super brave, Daddy, she whispered back, just like a real superhero. Jenny appeared beside them, tears in her eyes. That wasn't quite the corporate speech they were expecting. Mike laughed. No, but it was the speech they needed to hear. As reporters clamored for comments and executives huddled in corners, Mike held his daughter and felt, for the first time in years, truly hopeful about the future. Not just for his family, but for all the families who would benefit from this initiative. One moment of standing up for dignity had started a movement. Now it was time to turn that movement into real change. 1 year later, the Seattle Children's Hospital looked different in the morning sun. Mike walked through the familiar corridors, not as a worried father this time, but as the executive director of the Dignity Initiative, accompanied by his team and a small film crew. Mr. Thompson, his assistant Rachel, hurried alongside him, tablet in hand. "We have the quarterly report meeting at 2 p.m., the conference call with the East Coast hospitals at 4, and my daughter's final checkup at noon," Mike finished for her, "which takes priority over everything else." Rachel smiled. "Of course, I've already rescheduled the board meeting." They reached the oncology ward, where Dr. Martinez was waiting. "Mike," she greeted him warmly. "Or should I say, Mr. Executive Director?" Mike laughed. "Please don't. How is she?" "Why don't you ask her yourself?" Dr. Martinez gestured towards Sarah's old room. Inside, Sarah sat on the bed, but she looked nothing like the pale, fragile girl from a year ago. Her hair had grown back, dark and curly like her mother's. Her cheeks were full and rosy, and she was wearing her favorite Wonder Woman shirt, a new one, as she'd outgrown the old one. "Daddy!" She jumped up to hug him. "Easy there, champion." Mike caught her, marveling at her strength. "Ready for your big day?" "My last checkup," Sarah beamed. "Dr. Martinez says if everything looks good, I don't have to come back for 3 whole months." Jenny appeared in the doorway, dressed in her nurse's uniform. She'd gone back to nursing school after Sarah started getting better. "Look who's here." Sarah pointed at the film crew setting up in the hallway. "They're doing a story about the initiative," Mike explained. "But they can wait. This is family time." The examination went quickly. Dr. Martinez checked Sarah's vitals, reviewed her latest test results, and finally stepped back with a broad smile. "Well, Miss Sarah, I think we can officially say you're in remission." The word hung in the air like a miracle. Mike felt tears welling up in his eyes. "Really?" Sarah whispered. "No more hospital stays?" "Just regular checkups," Dr. Martinez confirmed. "You did it, sweetheart. You beat it." Mike pulled both Sarah and Jenny into a tight hug. All the sleepless nights, all the tears, all the uncertainty, it had all led to this moment. A knock at the door interrupted their celebration. Jeff Bezos stood there, a small gift bag in his hand. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said. "I heard today was the big day." "Uncle Jeff." Sarah ran to hug him. Somewhere along the way, she'd started calling him that, and he seemed to love it. "I brought you something." Bezos handed her the bag. "A little graduation present." Inside was a custom-made Wonder Woman action figure, wearing a hospital gown and holding a certificate that read Cancer Warrior. "It's me!" Sarah exclaimed. "And look what else it does." Bezos pressed a tiny button on the figure's back, and Mike's voice came out. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared." Mike shook his head, laughing. "You remembered that?" "Hard to forget the words that started all this," Bezos replied. "The initiative has helped over 10,000 families this year alone, all because you taught me about dignity that night." Speaking of which, Rachel poked her head in. "They're ready for the interview whenever you are." Mike looked at his daughter, still playing with her action figure. "What do you say, Princess? Ready to tell our story?" Sarah nodded enthusiastically. The film crew set up in the hospital garden, where Sarah had spent so many hours during her treatment. Now it was full of other children playing, many of them beneficiaries of the Dignity Initiative. "So, Mr. Thompson," the interviewer began, "1 year ago, you were an Uber driver struggling to pay medical bills. Now you're running a $5 billion initiative. How does that feel?" Mike looked at Sarah, playing nearby with other children. "Honestly, the title and the money, that's not what matters. What matters is that no other parent has to choose between dignity and their child's life." And Mr. Bezos, the interviewer turned to Jeff, What made you turn a potentially embarrassing incident into such a massive philanthropic initiative? Bezos smiled. Sometimes we need someone to remind us of our humanity. Mike didn't just stand up to me that night. He stood up for something bigger. He reminded me that true success isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives we touch. Sarah, the interviewer called softly, "Would you like to join your dad?" Sarah ran over and climbed into Mike's lap. "My daddy's a superhero," she declared proudly. "He helps people." "No, princess," Mike kissed her head. "You're the real hero. You taught me what true courage looks like." After the interview, as the crew packed up their equipment, Mike stood with Bezos watching Sarah play. "You know," Bezos said, "that night when you kicked me out of your car, I was on my way to close $1 trillion deal. Did you make it?" "No, and I'm glad I didn't. Some things are more important than money. You taught me that." Mike's phone buzzed. Another family approved for emergency medical funding. Another life changed. "Ready to go home, princess?" he called to Sarah. "We've got story time tonight." "Can Uncle Jeff come?" Sarah asked. "He does funny voices." The three adults laughed, and even the mighty Jeff Bezos couldn't resist those pleading eyes. "I think I can reschedule my board meeting," he said with a wink. As they walked out of the hospital, Mike remembered that rainy night a year ago, how close he'd come to just swallowing his pride and driving quietly. How one moment of standing firm had changed not just his life, but countless others. "Daddy," Sarah tugged his hand, "can we get ice cream?" "Of course, princess. We're celebrating today." "Can we get some for the other kids in the hospital too?" Mike smiled. His daughter, even after everything she'd been through, still thought of others first. "You know what?" Bezos chimed in. "I think that's a wonderful idea. Let's get ice cream for the whole ward." As they walked to the ice cream shop, Mike thought about all the families still struggling, all the battles still to be fought. But now they had hope. Now they had help. And it all started with a simple choice: to stand up for dignity, no matter the cost.